Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Robin Dwyer.
And I'm Sally Burdett. Our top stories. The world hits a streak of record temperatures as the United Nations warns we're on a highway to climate hell.
As extreme weather events continue across the globe, people in the German state of Bavaria count the financial and personal cost of heavy flooding.
Tight security in East Jerusalem as Jewish nationalists hold a parade that's historically been a flashpoint with Palestinians.
And Narendra Modi's BJP party loses its parliamentary majority, an unexpected blow for the Prime Minister, forcing him to negotiate with coalition partners in order to return to power.
The world needs an exit ramp off the highway to climate hell. That is the warning from UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres.
It follows a new report by the World Meteorological Organization, which says there's an 80% chance that global temperatures will exceed 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels for at least one of the next 5 years. Speaking on World Environment Day, Guterres called on countries to deliver on their commitments to restore degraded ecosystems.
The UN chief also drew on supporting evidence from the European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service. It shows new global temperature records were set for every single month over the past year. The average global temperature for the last 12 months was also the highest on record at 1.63 degrees above the pre-industrial average.
For the past year, every turn of the calendar has turned up the heat. Our planet is trying to tell us something, but we don't seem to be listening.
And in the annual State of Carbon Dioxide Removal report, experts say governments need to plant more trees and use technology to quadruple the amount of CO2 removed from the atmosphere in order to hit global targets. China says it plans to establish an initial carbon footprint management system by 2027 to help meet its carbon-neutral goal. Well, let's talk now to Wilfran Mafuma Okia, who's head of the Regional Climate Prediction Services Division at the World Meteorological Organization. Welcome to the programme. Good to see you. So this yet another report on perhaps the worrying state of the climate. Just how worried should we be?
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I think the world is bracing for unprecedented heat, as indicated in the report we published today. And by the way, this report is a collaborating effort of the best center, 15 around the world, which try to provide an outlook for the next 5 years. So basically what the report is saying, we have a 90% chance for the next 5 years to be warmer than the past 5 years. And the second alerting bell here is that we have 90% chance for at least one of the year in the next 5 years to be the warmest on record. And you remember 2023 set the record. What the report is saying is that in the next 5 years, we will beat the 2023 years in terms of record heat.
So what does this all really mean in practice? What will this temperature rise mean for our weather and how it affects us?
Yes, it will affect us in different ways. First, it is not good for the health condition. So very high temperatures are very bad. We could see from what is happening in India recently with record-breaking temperature. So, but what the report is also saying is that if we provide the world with the best available information, prediction, we might be able to assist the policymaker and decision maker in taking decision and action, because what they need is the science guide information and the best available knowledge.
So this is information that can be used, you think. Do you think it is still possible at this point to turn this around?
Yes, because we as the technical arm, we provide the science, and it's for policymakers to try to curb the rise of greenhouse gases. That's a political decision. We simply provide are providing the best information for the policymakers.
And we heard Antonio Guterres hitting out at fossil fuel companies, urging countries to ban advertising for those companies. Do you think something like that could make a difference?
I think so, but again, it will be depending on the will of the government and the effort, and we will try to complement that effort by working with all the countries, trying to coordinate how we access, deliver, and disseminate the information, so at least we can save lives.
Wilfran, good to talk to you. That's Wilfran Mufulmo-Okyie from the World Meteorological Organization.
Thank you.
All right, so the German state of Bavaria is still dealing with the aftermath of flooding. 5 days on, many areas remain without power and rail services are still disrupted. Our correspondent Natalie Carney reports.
Birgit says she knew it would be bad when she heard of the heavy rains in Augsburg. The river behind the house she has lived in her entire life flows from there.
I knew something really bad was about to happen, and I don't want to experience something like that again. It left my nerves on the edge. It's just horrific.
Her sister Karen says they lost many personal items which are irreplaceable.
Some of these things have been left in the basement for 40 years. Everything is ruined now.
It's a familiar sight here. Personal property being hauled away or thrown in giant containers for the dump. Items that once brought joy now evoke painful memories. In the municipality of Allershausen, the fire brigade continue to pump out water from the basement of houses and buildings, including the local city hall. More than 40,000 emergency service personnel are helping with the statewide disaster.
After a few days, they've clearly been able to extract much of the water, but you can get a great sense as to how much water there was simply by looking at the walls. You can possibly see here there is a line indicating how high the water actually came.
Residents who did not evacuate are struggling.
There's no electricity, no hot water. There's nothing to cook. We have no coffee at all to drink.
Stores and restaurants are all closed due to the lack of electricity. This was the storage area of a local construction company. Its owner, who wished not to be on camera, told CGTN that the entire space was flooded within just 2 hours on Sunday.
All of the stuff is underwater, all the electrical appliances, 70 to 80,000 euros worth.
He's unsure if his insurance will cover the costs. While the total financial consequences remains uncertain, Bavarian Prime Minister Markus Söder has allocated a minimum of 100 million euros to those most affected. Germany is no stranger to floods, most recently in 2021, when more than 180 people lost their lives and the cost of the damage ran to $54 billion.
These images we've been seeing are reminiscent of those of just 3 years ago. Yet beyond the acute needs of those in the flooded areas, climate experts are warning that the severe weather patterns that lead to these floodings will only become more frequent and more severe due to the rise in global temperatures.
While the rain has stopped in Germany, it has crossed to neighboring Austria, where German rivers also flow, leaving many there worried that the worst is not yet over. Natalie Carney, CGTN, Allershausen, Bavaria.
And extreme weather continues across the globe. Guangxi in China is on its 4th day of heavy rainfall, which has left roads under a metre of water. Villages in mountainous areas have been evacuated, with emergency teams trying to rescue stranded residents and drain some of the floodwater. At least 26 people have been killed in heavy monsoon storms in Sri Lanka. The rain caused landslides and flash flooding, uprooting trees and bringing down power lines. The government has deployed the military to help with relief operations. Millions of Americans have been warned to prepare for extreme temperatures in California and other parts of the Southwest. Temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius are being forecast in some states. The heat's expected to move to northwest regions by the end of the week.
Now, gas prices have eased after rising to their highest point this year on Monday due to a crack in a key Norwegian pipeline. The outage saw the European benchmark jump 13% in trading on Monday. Analysts warn the incident underlines the fragility of the market, which remains dependent on a smaller pool of suppliers due to sanctions on Russia. Well, Gaurav Sharma is an independent energy analyst joining us now. Hello, Gaurav. Thank you very much for joining us. So this cracked pipe, it seems like ultimately a small issue. It's being corrected. But what would you say is the biggest lesson that we need to learn from this event, which saw prices jump quite alarmingly for a period?
Good to be back on the program. You see, as you mentioned, your lead in, the continent is reliant on a very small pool of individual producers. And when something goes wrong, there's very little margin for error. I think what Europe needs to learn is it needs to continue down the track of improving its storage. Now, one thing I would say here is that this reliance on individual producers definitely hurts, but the pain is sort of short-term pain because the recovery is around the corner. In the wake of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, what happened is that Europe learned its lesson about dependency on Russia, improved its storage, so the storage levels will incrementally go up in the summer months, and that might help Europe. However, what that can't do is create help the continent avoid temporary price fluctuations like we've seen in the past few days.
Do you think the answer, you mentioned storage, which is important, and we know that the EU is working on that, but do you think the message is also to have more diversity? Because we know that Norway supplies at least a third of Europe's gas.
Indeed, that is true, but the fallback mechanism in wake of the Russia-Ukraine war has been to sort of rely on the United States. Now, what that happens is that it creates a bit of a global conundrum. The Europeans turn to incremental volumes from the United States. That then creates a bit of a paucity of supply in the market, and you'll see Asian prices out in Asia, going up as well. So this domino effect sort of kicks in. Now, diversity of supply is well and good, but if you sort of keep Russia out of the loop, out of the importation loop, then there's only a finite number of suppliers that you can turn to, the continent can turn to, and right now that happens to be the US, a country that the Asians are also incrementally relying on. So that creates this infraction in the market.
I want to ask you, especially in the light of the UN's Antonio Guterres saying we basically need an exit ramp because we're on the highway to climate hell. We're seeing in India with massive heat waves, LNG gas, which of course is liquefied natural gas, transported via ship as opposed to natural gas via the pipeline. But that puts pressure on demand because people need to cool their homes in extreme heat. Do you foresee a time when climate change is going to have a massive impact on the price of gas?
Oh, definitely so. But you see, the thing is, we can always say that we can turn to renewables. And a number of G7 nations, the wider OECD, and a number of major Asian economies are working towards a pathway of having incremental renewables in their power grids. Now, the question is, there are, and this might some viewers might find it strange, but there are points in time in the power generation cycle where there is no wind, there is no sun. And what is the fallback mechanism? So unless we improve battery storage and not turn to natural gas, that becomes a very difficult problem to solve, and it is going to take better parts of a decade to sort of work out whether natural gas can be a fallback fuel or not. Right now, it's looking like there is no alternative, but yes, it's a pressing concern. People might want to diversify, but at the same time, they're faced with this problem where storage has to be improved first before we can talk about a natural gas switch-off.
All right, thank you so much. Gaurav Sharma is an independent energy analyst.
Russia's national energy supplier Gazprom says it's unlikely to recover sales lost due to Moscow's offensive in Ukraine for at least a decade. A report commissioned for the Russian energy group's leaders says exports to Europe will barely reach a third of pre-war levels by 2035. Gazprom's reported a loss of $6.9 billion last year. The company hopes a new pipeline to China will help make up for lost European export volume. An agreement for its construction has yet to be reached.
BYD's battery unit will supply energy storage cells to Tesla for its Megapack business in China. Last month, Tesla started building its so-called Megapack factory in Shanghai to make powerful storage units used to stabilize energy grids. From early next year, BYD's FinDreams will supply around 20% of the cells needed for Megapack production.
Volvo's May sales rose 13% on the same period last year, buoyed by strong performance of its fully electric X30 vehicle. Sales of the Swedish carmaker's fully electric and plug-in hybrid models rose 37%, accounting for nearly half of global sales. The company is majority owned by China's Geely.
It seems a classic case of use it or lose it. McDonald's has lost a European Union trademark dispute over the use of the Big Mac name. A top European court says the fast food giant does not have the right to use the term Big Mac for poultry products in Europe. This court found McDonald's had not used the term for chicken meals for 5 consecutive years. The case was brought by Irish restaurant chain Supermax, which was blocked by McDonald's from registering Supermax as a trademark.
Now, Wall Street could be facing competition after plans were announced for a new US stock exchange based in Dallas. Well, our correspondent John Terrett is on Wall Street in New York. So, John, are we looking at a serious challenge here?
Yes, no. I don't think so. not coming out of Dallas in Texas. Let me try to explain why. Did you know, not a lot of people know this, as Michael Caine used to say, did you know that there is a Miami Stock Exchange? Yes, there is a Miami Stock Exchange. And I've been doing this job on this spot for 8 years for CGTN. And some people will say that is 8 years too many, but that's another story. I've been doing it for 8 years, and in that time, I have never, ever, ever mentioned the Miami Stock Exchange. And this is an exclusive for this program. There we are. We mentioned Miami for the first time. So what's happening now is that there's one they're trying to get together in Dallas, in Texas. And basically, it is backed by two pretty major companies. One of them is called BlackRock, which is the company to work for on Wall Street, run by a man called Larry Fink, who is the CEO on Wall Street these days, along Jamie Dimon, alongside him, I suppose, over at JP Morgan Chase. And the other company is Citadel, and you're looking actually at the Citadel Post. This is Citadel's Post here, and this is run by a man called Ken Griffin, and he features in the film Dumb Money. For not very good reasons, frankly, but anyway, he's in it. And these are two massive Wall Street titans, and together with almost 24 other companies, they've put together about $120 million to create this stock exchange in Dallas, in Texas. They want it to be more CEO-friendly. Not entirely sure what that means. And they want to do it because there's a rising tide of regulation going on in Wall Street at the moment. If you think back to Arm Holdings in Cambridge, remember they fell out with the London Stock Exchange and came here. And now we know that Shein, which is this huge Chinese clothing website, has fallen out with New York over regulatory issues, and they're having their listing in London now. So they're trying to get round that by creating this Dallas exchange. Now, the thing is, it'll be electronic like the NASDAQ. It needs loads of regulatory hurdles to get through just yet from the leading regulator, the SEC. At the earliest it comes online is 2025, maybe 2026. It will be a national exchange, although its focus is going to be the southeast of the country, kind of Dallas over to the Pacific Ocean, I suppose you would say. But the thing is it really an exchange? I mean, will they have market makers like we have here, where you've got people creating markets and opportunities? Will they have primary listings like we have at the NASDAQ and here? IPOs, in other words. No one knows the answer to that, and if they don't, it's just going to be another little exchange sitting there all these years like Miami. Now, it's worth pointing out that in America we have the Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P 500, and the Russell 2000 for the small companies. We used to have the American Stock Exchange as well, which if there wasn't a building in the way, I would be able to look at right now. The building is still there, but the trading floor is gone. It kind of got amalgamated here. And dear old China, of course, has at least 3 stock exchanges. We've got Shanghai, Shenzhen, and now we've got Hong Kong as well. So it's not unusual mandatory to have more than one stock exchange. The NYSE says, well, best of luck to you all with that. We'll see how it goes. One thing bearing in mind, of course, Texas is a long, long way from the center of power, where I am, and Washington, D.C. It is a long way from those centers of power. So it's kind of possible that there will be a more relaxed sort of atmosphere for getting involved with that exchange. That may be a reason that CEOs might be attracted, but I can't see them leaving here, to be honest with you.
Well, John, you might not have mentioned the Miami Stock Exchange on the programme before, but one thing you definitely have mentioned is US jobs data, and we've got some new numbers out.
Yes. Yes, we do. And it's all about jobs this week. Everything is about jobs. Sometimes, you know, they just push all the other data to one side. And this is the week that they do it. So yesterday we had the JOLTS report, J-O-L-T-S. That's the number of job openings in America. Came in at about 8 million, the lowest it's been for 3 years. Today, the ADP private jobs report, 152,000 put on, not 175,000, as we were told, and down from 188,000 revised in April. And all these jobs were mainly service jobs. That's real estate and renters and leasing and stuff like that. Manufacturing only accounted for about 3,000 of them. And so the situation seems to be that there is a definite sign now that the US economy is slowing down, possibly quite dramatically. So the thinking, the mindset here is, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We don't want it to slow down too much. We must have an interest rate cut before the end of the year to avoid a recession. But the Bank of America, well, not the Bank of America, but the Federal Reserve is not really talking about interest rate cuts, are they? They're still concerned about the buoyant job market and the robust consumer and all that kind of stuff. So that's the battle going on, and that's why the Dow is now down about 1,300 points from 40,000 a couple of weeks ago. At the moment, it's up only 7 points, but the Nasdaq, interestingly, is at an all-time intraday high. Next thing to look out for, ECB tomorrow, jobs report for May here on Friday.
John, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks very much, correspondent John Tarrant there in New York.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, a possible new front in Israel's north. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warns he's prepared to launch strong action against Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe.
Israeli jets have struck more targets in central Gaza, killing at least 75 Palestinians. This is according to Hamas officials, and it comes as mediators in Qatar discuss stalled ceasefire talks after the latest plan was outlined by the United States last week.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he's ready to launch an offensive along the country's northern border with Lebanon, with his cabinet set to discuss it. Tensions have flared since the 7th of October, with rocket and drone attacks by Lebanese militant group Hezbollah being met with Israeli airstrikes.
Well, there is tight security in East Jerusalem, where Jewish nationalists are holding an annual march known as Jerusalem Day. Our correspondent Jonathan Regev is at the Old City's Damascus Gate and joins us now. Hello, Jonathan. What has been happening there? What is the mood at the moment?
So thousands of people, as you mentioned, are now marching in what is known here as the Flag Parade, which is the climax of the celebration called here Jerusalem Day, the day marking the unification of the city 57 years ago in the Six-Day War. And many of the people have walked into the Old City through the Damascus Gate. This is quite a focal point, as the Damascus Gate is the main entry point to the Muslim quarter of the Old City, and with thousands of Jewish people entering with Israeli flags, it is a focal point. We have seen some minor clashes between marchers and police, also between some the local Arab population and police. Not a lot of clashes, we have to say. The march is ongoing, and it will culminate with a main event at the Western Wall inside the Old City. Security is extremely tight, hundreds and hundreds of security officers, and yes, there have been minor clashes, but all in all, the march is walking as planned.
Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has also been talking about the potential for a new war front in the north of the country with Lebanon. We know that Israel and Hezbollah have been trading fire over that border for months. What exactly is he saying, and why is he saying it now?
Israel and Hezbollah have been trading fire for months, yes, but the past week was probably the most intense since that war broke out. If we look at the Israeli side of the border, a lot of rockets, a lot of UAVs, major fires breaking up, leading up all along the northern border, and the Israeli public is saying enough is enough. It's time Israel goes on the offensive. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was this morning in Kiryat Shmona, a city located right on the Lebanese border, and over there he's saying that Israel is ready to go on the offensive if Israel decides to do it, that the army is ready, and once the order is given, Israel can go forward with an offensive in the north. Having said that, this has been the reality for 8 months, and Israel has so far refrained from a major operation in the Lebanese border, an operation which would also include a ground offensive. For now, it is still mostly strikes from the air with artillery, Israel focusing its ground forces in the south, but with the Israeli public perhaps losing patience with what is happening in the north, a major operation and a ground operation there may be approaching.
All right, thank you so much for that update, Jonathan Regev in East Jerusalem.
Let's get more from Gaza now. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari reports from Khan Yunis.
Well, the plan that Israel has been talking about are translated into military actions on the ground. The bombardment has been thorough and very intensified in the different parts of eastern Al-Bureij, Al-Maghazi, and even Al-Garara in Khan Yunis eastern area. The number of people who are killed tops 80 people after the Israeli occupation forces targeted one person who was riding a bicycle and claimed his life. The number of people who are in the emergency and reception department in Shuhada Al-Aqsa Hospital is increasing by the minute. The suffering is beyond imagination, and the number of people who are coming with different injuries seeking medical care is increasing. The situation is extremely dire, and those plans seem to be plans to further advance into the eastern part of Al-Bureij and Al-Maghazi in central Gaza and Al-Qarara in Khan Yunis. There seems to be an increase in the ground operations in all different parts of Gaza central area, Khan Yunis and Rafah as well.
And Akram, rival Palestinian groups Hamas and Fatah have said that they are going to meet for talks later this month.
Yes, they're meeting to talk. They were invited by China to talk, and they have been talking for the last 17 years. The relation between them is overwhelmed with a skepticism and questioning the intention. Now they're meeting, they're discussing the future of Gaza, they're discussing the future of Palestine, they're discussing the Palestinian statehood, they are discussing a unified path toward the future, but they doesn't seem that they're going ever to unify. They have been exhausting all the different options for the sake of coming together, for the sake of facing the challenges that the Palestinians are facing. However, they are not succeeding up to this particular moment after 17 or almost 18 years of unifying their efforts and fighting together politically, diplomatically, and on the ground for the sake of just protecting the Palestinians and protecting Palestine. They will be discussing things, but for the ordinary Palestinians, this has been taking longer than expected, longer than needed, and longer than it should take. And they, Palestinians, are afraid that nothing tangible or serious would result from those ongoing talks, given the history of dispute between Hamas and Fatah and the controversy around the legacy and the agency and the representation of the Palestinians. Hamas as a faction has been gaining more power and more support by the ordinary Palestinians after October 7th incidents, and they are likely also to be aware of that and to be running all different affairs when it comes to those negotiations and even the negotiations with Israel, given their solid understanding of the facts that have been unfolding on the ground after October 7th.
Ikram Al-Satri in Gaza. Now, Slovenia has become the latest European country to recognize Palestine as an independent state after Spain, Ireland and Norway.
But opposition parties say they will try to reverse the decision. Our correspondent Johannes Pleshberger reports.
Slovenia is just the latest European nation to officially recognize Palestine, but the country's opposition says the procedure was unlawful.
They did it with violation of rules of procedure of Slovenian parliament, so it's not nice. Only left side of the parliament accepted it.
Seiko Konde, who presents one of the country's major news shows, expects the opposition to take further action.
So the Constitutional Court could decide that the procedure was wrong. We might even end up with revoking the recognition.
According to a small newspaper poll of 600 people, the majority of Slovenes agrees with the recognition of Palestinian statehood. The government here in Ljubljana compared the Palestinian fight for independence to Slovenia's own struggles in the 1990s, when the small Central European country declared independence from Yugoslavia.
This is the only political and diplomatic tool we currently have to pressure on the Israeli government, to pressure also on Hamas to start negotiating for peace.
Foreign Minister Tanja Fajon urged other European countries to follow the example of Slovenia, Spain, Norway and Ireland and also recognize the state of Palestine. Johannes Pleshberger, CGTN, Ljubljana.
The US House of Representatives has voted in favor of imposing sanctions on the International Criminal Court over its decision to seek arrest warrants for Israeli officials regarding the war in Gaza. The Republican-dominated chamber saw a majority vote for the measure, with 42 Democrats in support. The White House last month criticized the ICC's decision to seek the warrants. The bill, which is not expected to become law, is seen as a political gesture of support for Israel.
A gunman who fired shots at the US Embassy in Beirut has been arrested after he was shot and wounded by soldiers. The army said the attacker was a Syrian national who's now being treated in hospital. One guard at the embassy is said to have suffered minor injuries. A search is underway for possible accomplices.
Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico has made his first appearance since being shot 4 times while he greeted supporters some 3 weeks ago. In a pre-recorded speech posted online, Fico says he forgives his attacker. He also hopes he'll be returning to work at the end of the month.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his main opponent Keir Starmer have gone head-to-head in a TV debate, the first before a general election on the 4th of July. The pair clashed on taxation, the economy, the cost of living and hospital waiting lists. An opinion poll suggested that Sunak won the TV debate, although they are still predicting a Labour victory in the election.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP failed to win an outright majority of the seats in the lower house of parliament in a much closer expected result for the recent election.
Opposition coalition India has not yet conceded defeat as Modi looks to be sworn in for his third term. Our correspondent Ravinder Bauer reports.
The BJP's ambitions of winning more than 400 seats were thwarted by an alliance of more than a dozen opposition parties.
This is the third term of Prime Minister Modi, and we are going to form the government, and that is more over the last 10 years of our performance based on our actions on the ground.
The mood at the office of India's largest opposition party was celebratory after the results became known. After facing defeats in many elections, this time they were in the game.
Absolutely, Mr. Mallikarjun Kharge ji provided the right guidance to all the partners, to us, to everyone, and cobbled this beautiful alliance.
Counting started at 8 in the morning on Tuesday. The most shocking results came from the BJP bastion state of Uttar Pradesh, which sends 80 members to the parliament. There is a clear weakening of the BJP's grip on the state.
It's a moment of joy for rather the people of India. It is the people who fought this election, and this is the result which they have given it. We were expecting these numbers.
With the resurgence of the opposition, the era of coalition politics is here to stay.
Well, you're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the European Parliament election is just around the corner. Can the far right grab more seats as projected?
What do we mean when we talk about the difference?
Brazen axe.
The difference is in the detail, in the background.
Defense ministers from
The wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Sally Burdett and me, Robin Dwyer. The headlines again. The world hits a streak of record temperatures as the United Nations warns we're on a highway to climate hell.
Tight security in East Jerusalem as Jewish nationalists hold a parade that's historically been a flashpoint with Palestinians.
And Narendra Modi's BJP party loses its parliamentary majority. An unexpected blow for the Prime Minister, forcing him to negotiate with coalition partners in order to return to power.
The European Parliament election gets underway on Thursday. The far-right group in Parliament will be hoping to improve on the gains it made in 2019.
Voters across the bloc's 27 member states will elect 720 MEPs. Those representatives will sit for a 5-year term. They'll join together in broad political groupings once they're elected to Parliament. The far-right Identity and Democracy Group, or ID, has nearly 50 seats in the European Parliament. 18 are held by the National Rally, a leading right-wing party in France.
The 28-year-old politician Jordan Bardella is president of National Rally and its leading candidate in the European election. He's enjoyed strong support among young voters after emerging as a social media sensation. Here's our correspondent, Michael Marilia.
Jordan Bardella's campaign focuses on what he says are France's problems. He uses social media to criticize the government for failing to deal with these problems. And he positions himself as the solution. Here he says that he's the candidate of a France which can no longer take its share of immigration, a reference to the EU's policy of requesting states to accept a certain number of migrants. This kind of talk is common among far-right groups, but Bardella frames it in a strategic way, saying he's the candidate of a France which wants to remain France. He positions himself as someone who's there to protect the country, someone who's strong on immigration because France has no real choice. Bardella also paints a picture of a country in decline. He says here that he wants to address all people whose hearts bleed when they look at the state of France. Now, Bardella rose to fame as the protege of Marine Le Pen, the former president of the National Rally. We've seen several videos showing the two of them together at campaign events. The question is, will he position himself as his own man? Right now, it seems like he's leaning on Le Pen's reputation. But polls suggest that National Rally and the broader ID political bloc will deliver a strong performance in this election. Bardella's reputation within the far right could get a boost, if that's the case.
Well, Bardella's party is leading opinion polls with those elections just around the corner. A poll for French newspaper Le Monde gives National Rally 33% of the vote.
Well, that's more than double the support for President Emmanuel Macron's governing coalition. Our correspondent Ross Cullen reports.
The final TV debate between France's leading EU election candidates took place on June the 4th, and immigration dominated the exchanges. The National Rally's Jordan Bardella said the other candidates were pro-immigration, but he was called a fascist by the Green Party candidate Marie Toussaint. Now, the Socialists, they denounced the lack of a comprehensive European migration policy, and they argued in favour of developing legal channels for migration. This is Jordan Bardella's first European Union election as the leader of his party, and he was criticised for being pro-Russia and supporting Moscow's annexation of Crimea in 2014. Mr. Bardella replied that, quote, "I'm not in favour of France becoming a co-belligerent. War is serious business." Marine Le Pen remains the National Rally's most recognisable figurehead, and she is hoping that this election campaign can act as a launchpad for her expected tilt at the French presidency in 2027. She has twice run for the top job and twice lost to Emmanuel Macron, but he cannot run again in 2027. And so the National Rally are hoping that this will be their chance to finally take control of the Elysee Palace.
Well, there are less than 24 hours to go until voting gets underway in those European parliamentary elections.
The war in Ukraine is a major issue, especially in Germany, Kyiv's second biggest military donor after the United States.
Our correspondent Peter Oliver reports.
Beating the drum for votes in Leipzig, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz left this election rally for his Social Democrat Party in no doubt about his views on Ukraine.
Ukraine and its citizens have the rights to defend their freedom, their democracy and the sovereignty of their state. A peace dictate from Putin is not acceptable, and that is why we will continue to support Ukraine, because that is necessary.
Ukraine has been a big issue during campaigning. On the far left, calling for peace talks, including with Moscow, there is the newly formed left-wing populist group, the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, Reason and Justice, known as BSW. The BSW looks set to make their first entrance into the EU Parliament. Policies include stopping weapons shipments to Ukraine, raising minimum wages across the EU, and watering down climate goals, which is popular with those in industrial and manufacturing areas. On the far right, the Alternative for Germany party, the AfD, are also opposed to more aid being sent to Kiev. Despite a series of scandals, they could still make a strong showing. EU parliamentary elections are a chance for voters to send a message to those in power nationally.
It's seen as a secondary election, and in secondary election you kick the shins of the government, and then you have protest, and then we have other parties on the extreme left that are flirting with Russia, and on the extreme right that are flirting with a nationalist perspective and also flirting with Russia. So it's kind of a horseshoe flirting with the two edges with each other, and then a big majority of establishment parties in the center, and that is their dividing line.
Scholz's appearance in Leipzig was to support incumbent EU Parliament Vice President Katarina Barley in the upcoming vote. She says she recognises many feel differently, but believe Germany must stay the course in support for Ukraine.
We also want peace for Ukraine. We all want that. I know that we don't always agree on how exactly we can achieve this peace. I have respect for everyone who sees it differently than I do, because I know that we agree on the goal. And my position is that, as long as the people of Ukraine want to defend themselves, we're on their side and must support them in doing so. That is our moral duty.
For voters in the east of Germany, one of their biggest concerns is making sure the conflict in Ukraine ends and doesn't spread.
You can't let them run into a wall and perish. That won't be a solution either. So where is the solution? Well, if I knew, I think I probably would get a medal.
I hope the war doesn't continue, that it doesn't spread further across Europe. I think that's the most important thing. And in my opinion, that can only be achieved if we continue to support Ukraine with weapons.
They have to negotiate every day, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, somewhere. There must always be discussions. There must be a willingness on both sides for those who get along with each other.
With centre-right parties set to make up the largest bloc in the next EU Parliament, it's unlikely that European Union policy on Ukraine will change. But there are questions over what impact potential gains for far-right and far-left parties could have on future decision-making. Peter Oliver, CGTN, Berlin.
Climate change, energy and de-dollarization, some of the discussions taking place in the Russian city of St. Petersburg at a major economic forum.
Representatives from nearly 140 countries are there. However, both Western investors continue to stay away amid ongoing sanctions over the war in Ukraine.
Our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
Against the backdrop of geopolitical tensions and economic uncertainties, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum opens its doors to delegates from around the world. They gather to address pressing contemporary issues, including climate change, creation of a new multipolar world, future of the world's energy market, de-dollarization, and the evolving role of BRICS in the global economy. The most important event of the forum would be addressed by Russian President Vladimir Putin during the plenary session scheduled for June 7. After the dramatic slowdown of activities and high-profile visits to the forum during the years of the pandemic, it seems that this year the highest number of foreign dignitaries in a long time would attend the forum. Most of them will be coming from BRICS nations to discuss strategies to strengthen collaboration and bolster their collective influence on the world stage. On the sidelines of the forum, BRICS transport ministers would meet here in St. Petersburg, and it will happen on June 6th to discuss possible joint projects that should make the transport of goods and people between the member nations easier. It holds special importance for Russia as it hosts this year's BRICS summit. Aljosha Milenkovic, CGTN, St. Petersburg.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the iconic red bus that's going green. London's buses could get an environmental upgrade with China's help.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe.
Hungarian telecoms company 4iG is deepening its cooperation with Chinese counterparts.
Its chairman is calling for Europe to increase investment in telecom infrastructure to compete with global rivals. He's been speaking to our correspondent Pablo Gutierrez.
I think the biggest challenge, not just for 4iG, but for all, leading telecommunication and IT players or IT infrastructure players in Europe, more especially, is to be able to invest enough. I mean, this is very, very important because, data. The usage of data and the volume of data, what we have to transfer in our cables, so in our infrastructure, it's increasing. The demand is increasing continuously, and it will increase. It will be increased also, in the coming years continuously. So, what is very important that nowadays. To be competitive and to keep yourself competitive in this industry is the ability to invest enough into your network, both the fixed network and to the 5G and the mobile infrastructure. And the other thing is, from the other hand, in Europe, there are lots of telecommunication operators, and this is also makes this situation with the investment demand to the network more challenging, because in the meantime, if you compare the European telecommunication market, where you have, hundreds of telecommunication operators for, let's say, 300 to 400 million customers, while in the same time, if you see China, there are 3 telecommunication operators for 1.5 billion customers, or in the US there are 3 telecommunication operators for 400 million. So it's a huge disadvantage for Europe in general.
London already has around 1,300 zero-emission buses on its streets, with plans to convert the city's entire fleet by 2034.
To help reach that goal, China's BYD is showcasing its state-of-the-art double-decker, which it's unveiled at the London Bus Museum. Our correspondent Kitty Logan reports.
The iconic red double-decker bus, transporting London's passengers since the 1920s. For the last decade, older models have slowly been swapped for electric versions to meet clean air targets. But London has one of the biggest bus networks in the world, so there is demand for more electric buses to join the fleet. The Chinese firm BYD is a major player in this market, supplying electric buses in partnership with Alexander Dennis since 2013. Now it's launched its own upgraded double-decker. The key selling point, greater battery power.
Uniquely, this bus is the first example of us using our new Blade battery in a commercial vehicle, and what that brings with it is advantages of safety, performance and value for money.
The bus has a range of up to 400 miles from a single charge, making it ideal for London's lengthy bus routes.
So we can see here that what's really unique is that the battery is being used as a structural component within the vehicle.
BYD says its design allows for more space for passengers and better temperature control for the capital's varied climate.
For the end user, nothing looks any different. They see a red bus, but they're getting all the benefit of this technology.
The vehicle also has a tight turning circle, handy for navigating London's narrow streets and heavy traffic.
As you can see, the inside of this bus looks pretty much like your traditional London double-decker. But developers are hoping that its modern design is going to help contribute to London's cleaner air.
London already has lower emissions than many other major cities, and several manufacturers contribute to the range of electric, hybrid and diesel buses.
London has, really high ambitions for the bus network to become zero emission by 2030, and that's going to be a hell of a lot of work. So really our work starts now, but we have a great foundation with which to push on.
BYD hopes its new double-decker bus design will move from the test track to providing a passenger service by the end of this year, though the details of any deal with Transport for London have yet to be announced. Kitty Logan, CDTN, at the London Bus Museum, Surrey.
And finally, Boeing has launched its first ever crewed mission into space. The delayed Starliner spacecraft carrying 2 NASA astronauts lifted off from Florida. The launch was initially scheduled for last weekend, but was cancelled minutes before liftoff.
This is a final test before Starliner can undertake 6 more missions, and it marks a critical moment for Boeing, whose commercial plane and space units have faced successive crises in recent years. And that's all for Global Business Europe. Thank you so much for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN is Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team here in London, it's goodbye.